So I would like to welcome Gökçe Günel to our seminar. Gökçe is assistant professor in anthropology at Rice University. And she has a beautiful tree behind her laptop, I just see now. Her recent book, Spaceship in the Desert, Energy, Climate Change and Urban Design in Abu Dhabi, has recently come out with Duke University Press in 2019. And it focuses on the construction of renewable energy, but also on clean technology infrastructures in the United Arab Emirates, with a focus on the Masdar City project. She has published a broad range of work on important and I think really interesting topics such as air conditioning, carbon capture, water infrastructure, smart cities, energy grids, making an important contribution to broader discussions on energy and climate change adaptation. And for instance, more recently, she has co-written a brilliant short piece in cultural anthropology that I recommend, titled A Manifesto for Patchwork Ethnography, kind of discussing the nature of fieldwork during COVID-19 and the ways in which it kind of engages with, let's say, traditional fieldwork experience. So today she will share some of the more recent work on leapfrogging to renewable energy resources in sub-Saharan Africa, drawing on fieldwork with energy professionals in Ghana. Welcome, Gökçe, and thank you for sharing your work with us.
Thank you so much for your invitation and for the wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to share this work with you. And I'm going to give a brief sort of background on how I came to write this paper and sort of contextualize it in a larger book project that it's part of. And I'll share some images with you as I'm going along. So if there's any issues with the images, please let me know and I can sort of fix it as it happens. And so here we go. Okay, can you see? Okay, perfect. So as Maria said, last year I published a book called Spaceship in the Desert, Energy, Climate Change and Urban Design in Abu Dhabi. And the book concentrated on the construction of a futuristic eco-city in Abu Dhabi called Masdar City, which was infused with utopian ideas about the time after oil. So in this project, I basically studied the emergence of renewable energy and clean technology infrastructures in the Arabian Peninsula and examined how oil-rich economies prepare for a future with less oil. And the ethnographic research for the book took place in the UAE with complementary fieldwork in the US and Germany. And so today I'm going to present some thoughts from my new book project where I flip this question and ask how energy poor countries satisfy urgent power demands and accordingly investigate the quick and provisional energy infrastructures they employ. So in addressing urgent electricity demands, many countries in the global south are looking toward quick power generation systems. And one emergent system is power ships. So floating power plants that anchor at a harbor, plug into a national grid and generate electricity with heavy fuel oil or natural gas. The Turkish company Karadeniz Holding, or Car Power, as it's known across sub-Saharan Africa, has become an increasingly popular producer of power ships in the past decade. So in a context where temporary power is gaining popularity, power ships differentiate themselves from their competitors through their formal qualities, namely by being ships which can move from sites of production to sites of consumption, utilizing a seascape relatively independent of logistics networks. And here you're seeing an image of the company's most recent ship in Ghana called Osman Han, and this is the largest ship that the company has so far built as well. So a family-owned business, Car Power, builds the ships on spec in various shipyards in Istanbul and leases them to places with high energy demands. And unlike other systems of power generation, the construction of power ships is undertaken in a completely different environment than the one in which the floating plant will function. So by centralizing production in shipyards in Istanbul, the company controls its operations efficiently. And power ships don't require large pieces of land, and making the projects even more desirable for the leasing countries. So once they arrive at the harbor, the only supplement the power ship necessitates is high-frequency cables that connect the ship to the nearest substation. So in the case of Tema, Ghana, for instance, this substation was 9 kilometers away. And finally, since their only connection to the land is these high-frequency cables you see in the image here, the power ships also seem more tenuous than land-based plants, giving the appearance that the ship could leave basically any time. Car Power's projects were planned and operational in Iraq, Lebanon, Indonesia, Ghana, Pakistan, Zambia, Sierra Leone, Gambia, Mozambique, Senegal, Libya, South Africa, and the list goes on. So as of March 2018, the company owned 43 vessels, and more than 20 of these were power ships, while others were service ships that delivered fuel or provided housing to crew in locations where accommodations were difficult. And Car Power labeled their project The Power of Friendship, presenting it as a broad and cordial campaign to bring quick and cheap electric power to those in need. And power ships are also, they illustrate a move from what power companies have called permanent power to temporary power. And although this binary, of course, doesn't reflect the complexities of this transformation. So a 2014 article in Power, the Go to Trade publication, asked, when temporary power supplies nearly a quarter of the grid's demand, is it still temporary power? How about when a project lasts 10 years? The article continues, calling power a service temporary doesn't quite capture all of its distinguishing attributes. It's temporary rather than permanent, rented rather than owned, mobile rather than fixed. It's also modular and easily scalable. So others from the industry have argued that temporary power stations are compelling due to their rapid installation and low upfront capital requirements. So this introduction probably feels a little bit disjointed based on what you read in the paper, but I actually started this project because I was interested in the power ships and then started doing more and more research on larger electricity production issues in Ghana. So I was drawn to the conceptual and empirical questions regarding floating power plants, and I didn't initially know which power ship I could follow. And the company's ships in Iraq were the first ships, but I knew they would be inaccessible because of different kinds of security issues. But the two floating power plants they had moored near Beirut in Lebanon since 2013 attracted my attention, especially because much had been written about them in the media. So, for instance, an article in The Guardian in April 2013 announced moored at specially constructed dock at a specially constructed dock 100 meters off the coast of Beirut, a huge hulk of a ship rises impressively at dusk against the fading pinks and blues of the western sky. But this is not a U.S. aircraft carrier or foreign warship sent to keep an eye on politically fragile Lebanon. Its purpose is more peaceful, but in its way equally dramatic. The ship, the Fatma Gül Sultan, is the centerpiece of an innovative project to overcome chronic electricity shortages in developing countries struggling to meet expanding demand. Known as a power ship, the Turkish-owned and operated vessel with 11 towering steel stacks or chimneys resembles a sort of floating Battersea power station. This article also included the quote from Lebanon's then energy minister saying, the power ship doesn't represent an ultimate solution to the electricity problem, but a 3-year temporary solution. But as of 2020, these two ships are still in, and the Fatma Gül Sultan and another ship are still in Lebanon and have escaped the massive port explosion that destroyed Beirut in August 2020. So I wanted to continue contributing to scholarship on energy infrastructure in the Middle East, and I thought, okay, I could perhaps do that by doing research on the ships in Lebanon. So in May 2016, I met executives from Car Power for the first time in their company headquarters in Kağıthane, Istanbul, and asked them whether I could visit their ships in Lebanon. And although they never explicitly said no, many I met in the office that day encouraged me to travel to see their ship in Tema, Ghana instead, claiming that the ship had a special role in the company's expansion. So the ship in Ghana was the company's largest vessel, and the ship that was there then produced electricity for the had started producing electricity for the country's grid in December 2015, and this was also the company's largest, the company's first ship in Africa. So one employee at the company told me how inspiring it was to start working in Africa because the company was taking light to places that were dark. And taken aback by their faith in this developmentalist mission and encouraged by their openness for guiding me through their projects, I told Car Power representatives that I would visit Ghana in December 2016. So I'd never been to Ghana before. And despite having no experience with doing research in West Africa, I didn't see this new research site as a radically unknown place, but rather as an extension of the energy, climate change, and infrastructure networks I've examined and cultivated for more than a decade. So in the book I'm writing now, which is provisionally titled Energy Accumulation, I examined the emergence of this unusual ship-cum generator, and I study the construction of the floating power plant in shipyards and corporate offices in Turkey, follow its deployment in Tema and Takoradi. I map and analyze the development and expansion of Turkish international business networks, mainly in Africa, and contextualize the ship within these larger geoeconomic and geopolitical relations. I examined the electricity production landscape in Ghana and engaged with a range of power producers, including hydroelectric, heavy fuel oil, natural gas, and solar power plants, and investigate the various material and discursive functions the power ship performs within this landscape. And this investigation gives me a window into understanding the materialization of a Turkish floating power plant in Ghana. So in the book, I make three broad points. First, I argue that the seemingly temporary power structures, such as power ships, preserve the imagination of long-term development and linear progress in places where they're put to use. So they're what I label liminal devices, whose presence demarcates a phase of planning and incubation, and whose eventual demise will engender a new era of modernization. Yet while sustaining linear and teleological logics of progress, power ships also postpone that progress. So in Ghana, the provisional status of the power ship denoted an ever-extended period of transitionality, soon to be followed by various kinds of renewable energy infrastructure. So by relying on the power ship, Ghana would avoid using permanent fossil fuel power plants, skip a proverbial stage in its evolution, and leapfrog to renewables. And decision makers in Ghana employed a range of technological models and business solutions to usher in that new era. Second, the book seeks to challenge this dominant linear narrative on energy transitions, a shared imagination of the future among energy professionals I met in Ghana and Turkey and elsewhere. Instead, the book offers energy accumulation as a label that describes human energy use more accurately. Many contemporary accounts of energy transition portray a shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy resources, document how politics of renewable energy vary in distinct social contexts, and investigate how governmental and corporate interventions impact energy technologies. Many proponents of this shift imagine that the transition will take time and that it will occur in response to price incentives and profit motives. But rarely does the scholarship on energy and climate change acknowledge how humans have consistently added new energy sources to the mix. For the past 2 centuries, consumption of all energy sources has grown extensively. So in contrast to conventional narratives around energy transition today, rarely are older sources of energy completely abandoned or replaced. While some scholars rightly argue that the energy transition narrative depoliticizes and obscures a wide variety of social, political, and ethical transformations, there's a general agreement in the literature that an expected transition from fossil fuels to renewable sources is and should be around the corner. By offering the term energy accumulation, I suggest that energy infrastructures have in fact changed in what science and technology studies scholar Benjamin Sovacool calls cumulative rather than fully substitutive ways. And then analysis of the power ship in Ghana, I think, is particularly useful for making this point. First, because of the liminal role the ship occupies in imaginations of linear energy transitions. And second, because it's situated in a national context where the reverse of an imagined energy transition is taking place. And you already read about this sort of this sense of reversal in the paper. But I want to share a very quick, ethnographic example from regarding this the idea of a reverse transition as well. So Paul, an energy specialist I met at the University of Ghana. Oh, sorry, this is the image I want to show. Paul, an energy specialist I met at the University of Ghana while doing research on this project, recognized the linearity of the dominant energy transition narrative. And maybe we're transitioning in reverse, he said. So until the year 1997, state-owned hydroelectric power plants produced all of Ghana's electricity. And inadequate rainfall and rising temperatures associated with climate change have negatively impacted these hydroelectric power stations, at times completely incapacitating them. And in responding to the resulting blackouts, new independent power producers from countries such as Turkey, China, and the UAE set up power plants in Ghana using heavy fuel oil and natural gas. And fossil fuel powered thermal power plants today produce 2/3 of Ghana's total electricity. And indeed, many of these plants had previously been used in countries like China and Turkey uprooted, broken down to pieces, and carried in cargo ships to now serve the Ghanaian grid. So the power plant you're seeing here in this image, the Sunona Sogri power plant, for instance, had been in use in China between 1991 and 2007. And the natural gas-fired plant started selling electricity to the Ghanaian grid in 2009 after its value had already depreciated. So in some ways, Paul had accepted the linear narrative of a transition and expected a move from fossil fuels to renewable energy resources to take place in Ghana. Yet given how the energy landscape he closely observed did not correspond to the expected timeline of transitions, Paul wondered if Ghana as a country was moving backwards, although presumably it had to move forwards. So by arguing that Ghana was transitioning in reverse, he made sense of his environment while keeping an attachment to the seemingly one-dimensional terms of the energy debate. Okay, so the third point that I want to make in the book is that such energy accumulation is possible thanks to thick and long-term geopolitical and geoeconomic connections between various international actors, such as Turkish involvement in sub-Saharan Africa. So Turkish investment in Ghana's energy sector followed services provided by Turkish Airlines, which has direct flights and cargo services from Istanbul to more than 50 cities across Africa. Since 2002, Turkey has also expanded its governmental presence in Africa in various guises and currently operates embassies in 44 countries. On a discursive level as well, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's anti-Western propaganda has found supporters in sub-Saharan Africa. In addressing African audiences, Erdogan falls back on Turkey's Ottoman roots, offers a revisionist history of the empire by instructing his listeners that Ottomans never colonized Africa or enslaved its peoples, criticizes the development strategies implemented by the IMF and the World Bank across the continent, and overall seeks to propose an alternative to the West. In doing so, he attempts what historian Ayşe Çavdar labels imperialism by anti-imperialists. So the seemingly simple makeshift qualities of temporary power infrastructure, such as the power plant, have relied on and reproduced such imperialism by anti-imperialists. And in February and March 2018, I attended a diplomatic trip to Algeria, Senegal, and Mauritania with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his entourage, and which informs one of the chapters of this book. And this is a photograph from that trip. So in other words, the book project asks how floating power plants emerge, and each chapter offers discrete but complementary responses to this question, assembling people and places that are not always thought in combination with each other. And the book suggests that the floating power plants materialize because many decision makers perceive them as liminal devices that can produce extensive volumes of electricity for short-term periods and that can depart easily when they're no longer necessary. Many believe that the renewable energy future will follow the era of power ships, allowing the countries of sub-Saharan Africa to eliminate temporary fossil fuel-fired energy infrastructure. And yet the producers of floating power plants are invested in extending this transitional period, rendering stopgap solutions perpetual. Despite their seemingly temporary forms, floating power plants require long-term and thick relations between various government and business representatives. And they're especially desirable in countries like Ghana, which suffer from a lack of upfront capital for permanent infrastructure projects. So I hope this introduction to the larger book clarifies some of the paper's goals rather than obscuring them further. And I'd be happy to start the conversation with this sort of general background in mind, and I look forward to any questions you might have.